Professor of Theology and Literature at the University of Nottingham, and she's here to talk under the banner of Saving the Parish, but talk about the Deaneries' responsibility in that, how they take a lead, if so, how, and what action can be done. Alison, thank you.
Yes, I have lots of hats, but the one today is not my expertise in vampires, I assure you. It's on the parish, about which I've written one book with Andrew Davison, just looking for my PowerPoint, which I'm sure is quickly going to appear. There it is, wonderful. But today I'm going to talk about how the Deanery might help save the parish. And first of all, I too want to thank you on behalf of the ordinary people of the parishes for all that you do, and at so many levels. Obviously we've got bishops and archdeacons and deans and lay chairs, but as well as all that, some of you are doing huge amounts of absolutely basic parish work. And thank you for inviting somebody like me with this hat on to your conference. It's a very heartening sign that you want to listen to the parishes. And although Save the Parish is a campaigning group, we really do represent the breadth of Anglican grassroots opinion. On Living in Love and Faith, for example, among the steering committee alone, we've views from the strictly conservative to supporters of gay marriage. We embrace Anglo-Catholics and evangelicals, liberals from urban and rural churches, conservatives writing in The Spectator, and myself interviewed in The New Statesman, and we are mainly lay. I'm dealing with the Daily Post back at the moment and can tell you that we are the brave and cussed tip of an iceberg of pain that many, clergy in particular, dare not express. What unites us and allows us to travel together is a belief in a generous, outgoing and inclusive Church of England, which we believe the parish embodies, even in parishes which do not live up to this ideal. The church building itself, and I'm going to stick up for the church building, I think it is wholly missional, God's gift to us, and we need to have the creativity and imagination to make use of that which our forebears sweated for, in my humble opinion. Anyway, even in parishes which don't live up to this ideal, the church building itself witnesses powerfully to a God who is stable, faithful, and cares, and values that community and its identity. It matters in my diocese with the ex-mining villages. All they've got left, they've lost the pub, they've lost the pound shop, they might have Bet Fred, but it's Bet Fred and the church. I do not wish to leave them to Bet Fred. The problem is that despite many statements saying how much archbishops love the parish, since Mission Shaped Church back in 2004, the parish has been damned as inherited church. And evangelism policies have sought to disconnect mission activities, which we certainly need, through BMOs from the parish, culminating in vision and strategy, which aims to have a parallel system of 10,000, possibly lay-led, new worshipping communities, which undermines the parish ideal completely, which, like the NHS, is there for everyone. It's like opening a Tesco's alongside every co-op. As Alan Billings wrote from his police experience, it is quite disingenuous to say there will be a mixed economy or a mixed ecology. No organisation can operate two operating modules simultaneously without distorting its shape. It's a recipe for confusion and incoherence. As I said, we need mission initiatives. I'm part of the planning of one at my own cathedral, a kind of outdoor ecological one, offering the kind of put your toe in belonging that research shows is most successful in evangelism. This relationality is also characteristic of much of the estate's network outreach on social housing estates, which is almost invariably parochially led. Mission initiatives are best when porous to the parish community. What do you do if you leave the football club? Where do you go? What do you do if you move house? You need some connection to parish. I say this to emphasize that our aim is for the Church of England to flourish, and that we're not some heritage body, though I would argue that heritage is itself an area of evangelistic potential. Paradoxically, I know of several examples of people who wanted to save their parish church because of its architecture or its community role, and ended up on the PCC, and later became committed Christians. In one village near me that I have advised, Measle, love of their church, which the diocese wanted to close, revived them as a liturgical community. Now the cafe provides refreshments, and a little choir has been formed, the Measle Nightingales, who accompany worship, and a village of 350 now attracts an average of over 50 to 60 per service, but they're only allowed 6 a year. So limits for what they can do, bless them, are determined. So the aim of Save the Parish is to restore the viability of the parish system, to call for a commission into historic church buildings that will do something to support parishes in maintaining and repairing their often ancient buildings. We don't want to lift it completely like France. I've got a French expert here, she can tell me whether it really works, because to have some agency over your building is important. And again, it can be a missional opportunity to raise money. It can be a dreadful burden. It can help you, but we want to lift a lot of that burden. We also want to seek for better theologically and liturgically literate clergy who understand parish ministry. An awful lot coming in haven't a clue. And to rebalance central funding in favour of parish ministry. We've made excellent links with other bodies committed to this work, and we have a very high-powered finance arm. But the title I've given is to suggest ways in which deans and deaneries can help save the parish in the current situation. Now, deans are directly responsible for the clergy and parishes in their care. So the first way I believe you can help parishes is to return to the original understanding of the nature of a rural or area dean. For yours is an older role than that of archdeacon, dating back to the 4th century and going along with the development of parishes in continental Europe, which happened much earlier than in England. Although the rural dean's role was traditionally centred on his, as it was then, fellow clergy and their people, and was utterly parish-focused, today it is redirected partly as a diocesan role. Samuel Wilberforce in the 19th century, there he is, embodied today's assimilation of the dean to bishop's officer in his phrase, the bishop's spectacles, to describe how deans must report to the bishop on the effectiveness and ministerial care of processes in the parishes under their care. He also facetiously suggested the title slightly reverent to describe them, which keeps them in their place. What would you call lay deans or area, lay chairs? Very slightly reverent? Over the last 100 years, and especially in the command and control managerialism now current, the role of the dean as bishop's officer has before, while the role as spokesman and champion of the clergy has become a bit muted. This representative focus was a strength of the dean's ministry in Exeter Diocese, where after 1666, Bishop Jonathan Trelawney revived the position and made it an elected one by clergy. Also was in Wales, I discovered, reading funny books by somebody Seacombe, they chose them. And the bishop, well, they chose two names, and the bishop chose one. From the 19th century, bishops, as Arthur Burns has shown, tended to appoint deans to parishes under their own diocesan patronage to keep them close, as you might say. So I would encourage the deans among us to see yourselves as both sharing the bishop's oversight, but equally as the voice of the clergy and their people on the other. And I was trying to do some research on lay chairs and think, well, what's your specific role? Obviously, you're sharing this oversight to some degree. And I found the Diocese of Albans had done a bit of work. And they suggested that the lay chair's role was particularly to focus on people and the parishes. So I was talking to one of your number at breakfast, and she, in the first year of her role, is visiting every parish in her deanery in order to get to know them. So she is fulfilling that very parishy focused. As a true pastor, he or she will want you to have double focus, which will help to build better relationships between parish and bishop. And indeed, it's officially stated in the Area Dean's Handbook for London. The Area Dean is both bishop's officer and a parish priest, with a role as advocate on behalf of the clergy, a communication link between bishop and parishes, and in a position to represent the needs and thinking of the clergy too. This is important when it comes to pastoral reorganisation. Two reports, from anecdote to evidence and going deeper, stress the importance of priests to parish, so that amalgamation leads to decline. We all know this, and it's becoming painfully evident in the church in Wales. One deanery lost a third of its congregation in a year. While reorganisation is seen by some dioceses to be the answer, do they really think that parishes denuded of clergy and care will pay greater parish share? Laund Abbey Mission Area, or whatever it's called in Leicester, is being asked to double its parish share. Such reorganisations tend to be in rural areas, and while only 24% of the population live in them, 44% of Anglicans do. The postbag to save the parish reveals parishes often feeling so alone and even unprotected sometimes by their dean, who acts the diocesan enforcer, not the advocate. Yet they can be champions. In one, deans united to protest against diocesan plans and were successful. Unity is strength. But who makes a public fuss about clergy made redundant in their deanery? It took the lay chair of the Diocesan Synod and laity generally in Winchester Diocese to protest against all the things that went on there, which I will not name. But there were a lot of redundancies in the Northern Archdeaconry. You may be exemplary in standing up for your clergy and people, but some area deans are too scared to do so, with the resulting loss of trust. That's why lay chairs are so important, because you have a relative independence. You can speak truth to power. But I have considerable sympathy for deans, caught between these two roles, so often required to prepare parishes to vote for amalgamation of mergers, with sale of parsonages and even closures down the line. My own son-in-law, with a vocation to rural ministry, found himself not only rector of 9 parishes and 12 churches, but quickly also rural dean. Just dealing with 36 churchyard burials requests could use up a day a week. He then had the task of preparing 36 parishes for a future with 2 stipendiary clergy. In standing with the parishes against amalgamations, which will just expedite decline, deans will be fulfilling a second role. This is in the spirit of Canon C23 and is laid out by the Diocese of Truro, slightly ironically, because they're really into big mega parishes. In its handbook, deans are to notify the Archdeacon of all cases of need within the parishes arising out of lack of pastoral care or inadequate pastoral cover. They are there to see that worship and pastoral care are adequately provided. How can they do this in the new units? As I said, Leicester's about to form its first Minster community, Laund. It will consist not of 12 churches with 4 stipendiary posts, as the Synod voted in October 2021, which sounds quite good, but 35 in the Laund area. Plans envisage an oversight minister, clerical thanks to an amendment, an administrator, and 2 other stipendiary posts, which could be lay, one for growing discipleship, the other pioneering. And the diocesan finance report for 2021 looks forward to the day when they can reduce the number of stipendiary clergy and appoint more lay people to these posts. How on earth is any Eucharistic community or pastoral care going to be adequately provided in this model? How is it possible? What possible relationality is there? How will those appointed to clerical positions survive the work and not get ill? Who would want such positions? Not only could a dean hardly say hand on heart that pastoral and worship provision are adequate and effective, but would there be any role for a dean at all, since the new Minster or monster entity is the size of a deanery? We're losing levels of devolved authority and any commitment to Anglican worship and cure of souls. So I call you firstly to champion, secondly to pastor, and call out when pastoring and worship are deficient. And thirdly, you can help parishes by being honest with them. PCC's right of attending meetings for mutual support across the deanery only to discover this is about mergers and amalgamation, but it doesn't actually say so. In Leicester, conversations that were supposedly open presented a choice between 3 reorganisation models, not the choice of reorganisation as such. Our researcher and I pore with Truro people over on-the-way plans and are still no wiser sometimes about what is concretely proposed. It's lovely holy talk, but a bit vague. But STF funding means they must have plans. The benefits of honesty are great. Bishop Martin has already said a bit about how St Edmundsbury and Ipswich dealt with the deficit. Tiffer Robinson, sparing Bishop Martin's blushes, had written eloquently of how the policy of his diocese changed with the new bishop. He announced soon after he arrived that the policy of cutting clergy posts to meet our shortfall in parish share was a plan for decline, not for flourishing. Instead, for the past 5 years, our diocese has sought to counter a chronic annual deficit of around £500,000 through increasing giving and encouraging growth. Tiffer sees the key element here that everyone was brought into consultation and people were encouraged to give to remove the need for cuts. He writes, "The culture of the diocese has been gradually changing from one where they were seen as the enemy to one where challenges are shared. There's more openness and transparency in strategic decisions, and the diocesan synod actually feels informative and consultative. And it's also the policy of a poor diocese like Blackburn, where clergy and people have a security which can enable them to be open and generous." In Truro Diocese, claims for reorganisation are supposedly bottom-up decisions by the parishes, but look at this extract from East Wyvernshire Deanery. "We are to grasp this God-inspired vision with enthusiasm. The steering group has adopted this vision, believing it to be the way God is asking us to grow. Therefore, it is important to note we are not seeking opinions on God's given vision." To add insult to injury, not only are the new combined parishes in this deanery not allowed to choose their own name, in a county replete with local saints, they're instrumentally given the names Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, as if in a call-out for the local police. One task that deaneries require nowadays from parishes are strategic plans. These can be a ghastly fictional exercise in targets, sticks to beat parishes, But with a sympathetic dean, and I'm sure you're going to hear all about this, they could be opportunities to look at blessings and gifts. As with the climate crisis, guilt and fear just make people freeze up and not act. To act radically, you need to do so from a positive feeling of gratitude and the inexhaustibility of God's grace. So much of the present strategy depends upon retired clergy and laity, and I think that's probably what Leicester are banking on. They're not always allowed to be lay, people with their own secular callings. Sometimes they're treated like a pool of cheap labour. Yes, there will be some people glad on representative roles as focal ministers for pastoral support, but so many lay people feel used, exploited, and then paradoxically undervalued. This is particularly true of the elderly, and they do so much. In lockdown, I recall Hilda, aged 90, who should have been shielding as vulnerable, trotting past my house every day en route to do shopping and take prescriptions to the elderly, as she put it. Just getting a parish to sit down and count its blessings and honour people like Hilda is a good and fruitful activity. Then they can begin to think of how they can reach out beyond themselves, building on what they do in their daily lives and communally, sharing these deanery, encouraging and building up one another, as Paul urges us in 1 Thessalonians, can only be good. In the present decline, we need strong deaneries. But too often people are not interested in deanery synods, about which we try really hard at Save the Parish to enthuse people. I hate to say this, I'm sure yours aren't. It can be boring. Deans routinely say parishes are reluctant to collaborate. And this is part of the countryside. Locality is all important, and you do have to take account of it. We have one village on the Trent that has been uncooperative towards its neighbour ever since the northerly village failed to warn them the Vikings were upon them. Parishes need the deanery to flourish and share what they can. Youth and children's work is an obvious area for collaboration. I have got a picture of that. Where one parish might have a family or two, the deanery can gather them together in a critical mass, take them on a pilgrimage, give them a party or a craft morning. And Worcester, as you can see here, made such deanery work the focus of an SDF bid. It's one way to prize such money directly down to serve parishes, to actually use deaneries to apply for this money. A deanery drama group is another way to offer an activity across age groups. I ranged over deanery websites this week and found Sharnbrook Deanery in St Albans offering a passion play to which people were encouraged to invite a non-Christian friend. There are certainly initiatives that are easier to sustain through the deanery. Parishes need to understand that a strong and united deanery is a resource, and you're aiding parishes in your work. And of course, like the parish, the deanery is a mediating institution and part of the devolved authority that traditionally the Church of England has embodied. Authority is both devolved but also hierarchical, and if a hierarchy is to be virtuous, it should enable the level below to flourish fully and raise it to honour and presence. So power should always be devolved to the lowest possible level, as in Catholic and also Anglican social teaching, the idea of subsidiarity. I've praised the parish plan as a way of honouring what people do and locating ways to move forward. Deaneries too can have plans which might help the dean to keep focused and make the deanery understand the shape and character of their habitat. Maps are great here. The Church of England's document on this is, however, ominous. One of the hopeful benefits of giving an enhanced stance to deanery plans is that parishes will feel they have more meaningful input in the development of recommendations for pastoral reorganisation at an early stage. Here is what we fear, that deanery cooperation is a softening up for the creation of Frankenstein's monster parishes, which do not aid mission. They're ways of saving money and managing with fewer clergy, but with more nervous breakdowns. Through the parish system, traditionally power has been devolved to the lowest level, and through the incumbent holding the cure of souls, the people have participated in the diocesan household of faith and the larger body. Before the synodical system, the MP was the conduit for their local concerns, and parishes are having recourse to this again, with a number of MPs now involved in saving the very existence of the parishes in their area, such as Ben Bradshaw and Chris Loader in the West Country. If you create monster parishes, the incumbent is going to become a distant figure, and combining PCCs into a joint council will no longer allow local accountability or agency. How many people will be representative of the original parish in any of the levels? Even now, I am helping Tim Tabernacle, who find the 7 other parishes in their joint PCC uncomprehending of what this little community needs, not least the occasional Sunday service that only allowed Tuesday morning. I don't know enough about the authority of the area dean or the deanery generally in relation to problems like this and how you help parishes have agency. They're being deprived of resources at the very time that ever more is being demanded of them, and they're so often operating with one hand tied behind their back. Yet another recent report has made the blindingly obvious point that fewer services means fewer attend. Now, in my Tin Tabernacle benefice, it's decided all but 2 village churches will now lose any Sunday provision. So they'll all lose children, young people, working people, with a monthly only Tuesday morning service. And young families are the least likely group to organise themselves to travel miles away from home to the central service provided. All I could suggest to my Tin Tabernacle village was they had a post box for prayer requests and met in the church on a Sunday afternoon for tea and cakes, followed by prayer over these local pleas for intercession. That wouldn't count as a service and go against the vicar. But they know, not least because a grant-making trust they invited to view the building was refused entry, that the policy is to force them to close. Even volunteers to undertake reader training they put forward were rejected. And I just looked up the benefice to see how it fitted in its deanery and discovered the incumbent has study leave, so for 3 months there will be no services at all in the Tuesday villages. The deanery has a role here. The answer to the Tin Tabernacle benefice problem would be for the parishes to grow even closer to each other so they're ready to face challenges and have a common front. 5 years ago, my tabernacle benefice was in 3 benefices and different deaneries. They just didn't know each other well enough in the new benefice, let alone the deanery. What draws people together, though, are common tasks rather than talking shops. Pub quizzes, deanery bake-offs and duck races are good because they are competitive. They actually kind of play out there is a competitive element, and they somehow kind of neutralize it and turn it into something good and move people towards solidarity, paradoxically. Festival services, which little villages, churches can't do on their own, are really helpful. In my old deanery, we used to have the most spectacular Easter Eve ceremonies. We used to put all the oils from all the churches that were left over, and they just replaced them on Maundy Thursday on the bonfire. It was spectacular. You know, we got local young people, I can tell you. So I think things like that can be really good. But why not economic ties? In this cost of living crisis, why don't parishioners across the deanery offer their skills for exchange? French tuition, carpentry, gardening, hairdressing, car maintenance. You can make it easy by exchanging by the hour. Or reciprocal parish tasks such as graveyard maintenance. Small parishes can feel quite isolated, so anything that knits them into larger structures while keeping their agency and independence is good. Now, many of you are sitting there thinking, it's all very well, but numbers are plummeting, we have to act. There's no alternative to mergers, even if they accelerate decline. To which I'd say, there is evidence that traditional church done well is successful. While the Choate report and 3 studies of the resource church model have shown that numbers are often due to attracting Christians from other churches, 80% in the latest study. Meanwhile, there is a financial alternative. And my final suggestion is for you to educate yourself about this. STP has a whole section on the website devoted to diocesan accounts and central accounts. Most dioceses are not making proper use of TRA accounting in the diocesan stipends fund, which would free up lots of money. 1.7 million, I think, in the case of Truro. You're hardly using any of it. Oxford even tried to direct this fund away from stipends till we caught them at it. Many dioceses have too many people in administrative roles. Of course, one of the ironies of reorganisation is you need lots of administrators to do it. The Church Commissioners dole out millions through the SDF fund to do this. Using TRA plus cutting admin roles by 1/3, which you could effect by some central sharing of tasks, like let's make safeguarding independent, would fund 1,000 more priests. Our world is changing and demographics with it. A village in Leicestershire is about to have 3,500 new homes, and the whole of the East Midlands can feel like one giant building site. Climate change and energy costs, as well as more home working, are likely to accelerate the trend of people moving out of cities, and the cost. This is not the time to abandon smaller communities or poorer rural ones, or poorer urban ones. This is Shirley Warren. This church was built by donations for local people on a council estate, and it's now closed. A study of church closures in the Manchester area found they were twice as common in deprived communities. We have the money, we need the will. What is needed is delight and trust in Anglican liturgy, theology, and practices. A heart to share them, to see the missional potential in them, and not to blame the decline in numbers which affects all forms of communality, political parties, trades unions, sports, everything, pubs, on the parish. Increasingly, public intellectuals such as Paul Kingsnorth, Mary Harrington, Susanna Clarke are finding their way back to traditional faith, and every new social movement begins in this way. Yes, some churches may have only festival status. We need to be simpler and humbler with what we do. But as Bishop Rachel said, we need to hope that the gospel of Christ will not fail, and nor will the Church of England, if we trust in her, love her, and use her resources for good. You have a pivotal role in mediating between the lowest levels, the people and clergy on the ground, and you will serve them best if you too believe in our parochial embodiment and outreach. We will only survive if we cease to panic and instead count our blessings. God's mission in the world is one of inexhaustible self-giving love, life, and fullness. Only if we too act out of that sense of unfailing gifts and see blessings in what we have, will we flourish. But we can. Thank you.
Alison, thank you. We've got 5 minutes for any questions. So,
hello, Peter from Battersea in Southwark. If I agree with the need to save the parish and the role of the parish in our witness to the whole island, but I'm not sure about the conclusions reached by the Save the Parish's financial research team. How can I engage with that? I probably ought to declare an interest as one of the ex-diocesan staff that is now culled.
Well, you're very welcome to talk to them. I mean, one of the interesting things is that we took a lot of our accounts to Church House, with their accountants and had a very fruitful and interesting meeting, and they were very grateful to our finance people. And they agreed the figures. There were 3 million difference over all the different kind of sums and things that we'd done. And that was the way that we calculated pensions and the way they calculated pensions, which was slightly different. But you know, we have a website. You can come along to one of our, we've just had meetings in London. We had a meeting in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, open public meetings. Sir James Bernard Nugent, Second Sea Lord, produced a lot of finance stuff there. Anyone's welcome to come along and challenge him, or you know, you're very welcome to do so.
Thank you. Anne Foreman, Exeter Diocese. I have to say straight away that, I will buy your book, because I have not supported the campaign, and indeed had an article on via media and have exchanged views with James Nugent as well. Mm-hmm. Ben Bradshaw, you're right, supports parishes, but what I really want to, there's so much in what you've said that I want to challenge, but two things. One, I just cannot agree with you that clergy don't know what they're doing. I think that was a remark that I found difficult to accept. You said clergy tend to not have a clue. So I wondered whether the campaign. Well, that's what I wrote it down.
About what?
About your rural parish life.
It was about ordination training.
Yeah. You said they didn't.
About the nature of the parish was what I said. It's true. I'll give you an example. I did an instructed Eucharist in the cathedral for a comprehensive school. All the curates were there. The whole year's batch of curates, because they were all doing workshops. You can imagine how simple this instructed Eucharist was. It was the, you know, children had never been in a church before. It was so basic, it wasn't true. And I answered their questions about, you know, what are cathedrals, what's the Church of England, all this kind of stuff. The curates came up to me afterwards in a body and said, we've never heard any of this stuff ever before in our training. And in fact, Jeremy Morris said only last week, he used to teach at Westcott a class on Anglicanism, and he said that he had a lot of students who'd come, you know, sometimes they'd come from other churches and were being ordained in Anglicanism, or they'd been Christians for a very short time, and they were very resistant to even learning about it. So we've got ordinands who are not being taught, and I've actually looked at some of the details of the modules. There are lovely modules on the Durham Common Awards. But when you look at the actual content of what's being taught in a number of colleges, you will find that there is a general dearth. And just think, if you've been to, all you've ever experienced, well, it's in the Church Times this week, if you've only ever experienced HTB worship and they plonk you down in a bog standard Anglican parish, you're lost. That's what I meant. I didn't mean they don't know about all sorts of things, but we are beginning to lose that. We're not having, you know, people with a great deal of knowledge coming forward for ordination, and we're not always, I'm sure there are, I know there are really good exceptions. I've actually done a bit of teaching for some theological colleges on what parishes are, but we're just not, you know, we're losing all that.
Oh, thank you for explaining that. I think maybe in Exeter we're just lucky with the curates that we have.
Oh, I know some of Exeter's.
The other thing that I wanted to raise was I don't think parishes have anything to fear from strategic development funding or from bishops' mission orders. The two, they can work together, and they do in Exeter Diocese. And the other thing I wanted to say was, you suggested there was a lack of consultation or what have you. Mission and pastoral committees are there to actually see that process through, and it's replete with consultation.
Well, is Plymouth in Exeter? Yes. Well, I mean, in Plymouth, they turfed out several priests to put in a new kind of, it's on the outskirts of Plymouth. I can't remember the name of the churches, but you know, they changed their character completely. I think people found that quite challenging. Though I agree, Exeter Diocese in many ways, I would say, is a very, very good diocese that does things well. And when they got some SDF funding, they're one of the few places that actually used it for rural ministry. They had this lovely thing where you did a pilgrimage model, but I can't tell you how unusual that is. That's it.
It's 3 o'clock.